All right, guys, today we are going to be reacting to Andrew Wilson versus Feminist. Was feminism a necessary political movement, Le Champion?
Then if that's true, why the hell did you need feminism?
Because I don't think that it was about violence. I think that it was about a lack of political rights, if I can use that word.
Well, then, but we've already discerned that rights are force. Mm-hmm. So if we've discerned that rights are force and you say that we want more rights, it means that you want to have more force.
Sure.
So then you needed feminism, right? Feminism was a way for you to have force.
Yeah. I mean, I think that social movements like collective political action can approximate force
for women. But what do you need force for? If you're saying that men collectively would not move against women using force, why the hell do you need force then?
I think that they would collectively move against women using force. I'm saying
then you just contradicted yourself.
Well, I'm talking more in a political force sense. I don't think that men
What
in
is
general
political force?
I think the use of rights, things like that, like restricting rights, restricting mobility, disenfranchisement, things like
force.
That. It's all backed up with force, but I don't think it always necessarily translates to a one-to-one.
It is force because absent force, law has no bite.
Nothing. It wouldn't. So it will be literally nothing, guys. It will be literally nothing. Nothing will. It will. Imagine, just to put it in this perspective. If 10% of men. If 10% of men decide to just revolt and go against the system, we effed up. Now, if 10% of females decide to go against the system, we don't care. We simply don't care. Because they don't have the mechanism to throw the government away. You see what I'm saying? They don't have the mechanisms. 10% is almost like 10 million 500 men. Imagine that, 10 million. I'm telling you, like, if you start putting all these things into concept, but she's obligated to just defend a position that it has a flaw, and she realizing that. She's realizing.
Somebody says it is the law that you not do X, but there's no enforcement if you break the law. Is that a law?
Yeah.
I mean, is enforcement always violence? Like, is
enforcement always must be backed with physical violence for a law or for any type of right, period?
Maybe backed with the threat of, but do you think that all enforcement takes place solely through the threat of physical violence?
Yes.
Or do you think there are social mechanisms?
All of it has to be backed with the physical prowess of enforcement. Otherwise, why couldn't it just be ignored?
I mean, I think that there are things beyond the threat of physical violence that can... I agree with you that the threat of physical violence is what backs the majority of our laws, but do you not think there's also a social aspect of, like, appropriateness and, like, wanting to be perceived in a certain way, wanting to keep with norms,
if you're asking
customs?
about social norms.
Yeah.
Sure, but if there's a violation to a social norm, absent a law, that's one of the problems we have in society now, right? Which is there's no law which prevents you from moving outside of a social norm. Mm-hmm. So if that is the case, then nothing's preventing you. So let's say, for instance, there's no law which says that it's illegal to go out and dig up a dead body and do a dirty deed to it, okay? Mm-hmm. You agree that there will be people who do.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. But wouldn't it be better for us to have a law and force saying if you do this, there's going to be severe punishments for you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the social norm itself is not the enforcement. It's always the force.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that. I guess I still am stuck on how that means that we can't have an egalitarian society. Okay. I guess I should ask.
You would have the illusion of egalitarianism, but you never actually have egalitarianism. That will always be a product of the mind and never a product of objective reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is your view of feminism that it is pointless because there can never be egalitarianism?
Well, so you just earlier, and no offense, I'm just going to point this out so that you know, you spoke out of two sides of your mouth. You said, I don't believe that men would collectively come together to use some kind of force against women. But when I asked, why would you need feminism then? You said, well, because we need to have some kind of force to protect ourselves from the patriarchy. Well, both of these things cannot be true at the same time. This is where we come to what we call Schrodinger's feminist, which is I'm a strong, empowered woman, but also a victim at the same exact time. And it can't really be both. It has to be one or it has to be the other. So if you're a strong, empowered woman, and what it is that you want is some type of equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I think we've just discovered that that's not even a possibility. So what's really going on is you want some sort of political power, right? But you can't enforce the political power.
Well, that is, and when I say that equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I mean political power, because I don't think that men will collectively decide to use violence against women. So
they do it all over the world all the time.
Well, yes, on an individual level, I don't think collectively.
On a collective level.
Okay, so what do you think the solution to that should be for women?
Well, I think the first solution is you should understand that what you're doing is you're fighting the patriarchy by at the same time appealing to it. So if you and I can agree that force itself is political power, and that force itself is always going to be monopolized by men, then you've described a patriarchal system. If that is the case, and you say you want more political power, then you are actually appealing to a patriarchal system to give it to you.
Yeah.
Because they're going to...
Otherwise, and it all's going to boil down to that. And I think this is another red pill talking point right here. This is another talking point. And by the longest, I never really got into this almost my entire life until I got into the red pill stuff a couple of years ago. I would say 7 or 8 years ago. Something was not making sense. If I had to go to war, if a president becomes a female, if a female becomes a president, and then she declared war, I as a man has to go defend her decision, not women. Interesting, right? So that means even her decision to even declare war have to be defended by force, which is men. That in itself doesn't make sense, right? And why we pretend that makes sense, I don't know. I really don't know, guys. Why do we pretend this to make sense? I don't know.
The enforcers, right?
I can agree with that. I don't think it's good. I don't enjoy that situation.
So why not just have patriarchy? If that's the case, that
Yeah.
you're appealing to it anyway in order to enforce your rights inside of it, why not just submit to patriarchy?
Because I mean, me personally, I would rather not. I would not like to see the outcomes from a system that works like that. I wouldn't like to see women, I guess, in general, relegated to the domestic sphere. I wouldn't like to see the levels of...
When you say the domestic sphere, what do you mean?
The home, like child rearing. Me personally, I have no problem with that. That's what I see in my future
what could be more important than that?
For me,
for women.
I mean, for women, I think that should be up to the individual woman.
Yeah, I understand that you think... well, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I think that the key here is not to say that is bad, but I do think that sort of socially enforcing that is the only opportunity for women is bad, because not every woman will be fulfilled by that and will be happy in that position.
What job do you think is more important in society than being a mother?
I would agree that being a mother is the most important job.
Then how are you
Why not? Oh my God.
relegating women to the home?
Yeah.
If the most important societal job we can give them is motherhood, how is it a demotion? How is it
even a gilded cage is a cage. Like if a woman doesn't want to do that,
well, but
that's relegation.
There's never been women are not forced to stay at home and give birth.
They're
And
not
they've always
forced,
been
but
able to work. They've always been able to work.
There's definitely social pressure, and
good. We need social pressure.
Hey, Sean, thank you for the gifted 20 memberships. Appreciate it. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I would disagree that we need social pressure to keep. I mean, I'm sure you'll reference the decline in birth rate and decline in the birth rate. I don't really know, but I think that it's a biological impulse to have kids. I don't think people are going to stop having kids.
But they're stopping having kids.
There you go.
Maybe at a
Like-
slower rate.
No,
No,
at a
they're
huge rate.
stopping.
Like South Korea, you know what the birth rate is there?
And I've heard in South Korea, it's
Below.
It's a movement,
It's
an
below
intentional-
single replacement.
yeah, and I've
So-
heard that's an intentional movement on the part of women, which, I mean, that can be
Again, it's another self-destructive behavior. I don't know how not having kids is just advancing any. I don't know how not having kids is just advancing. I simply don't know. You have to explain me that one, Batman, because I don't know how a self-destructing behavior like this, not having kids because it's a movement. How is this okay? Imagine 2 or 3 generations not having kids. Just imagine that, guys. 2 or 3 generations having kids below replacement rate. My goodness, Lord. God help us.
example of women
But
exerting force.
I thought we didn't need pressure
pressure to make people have kids.
because people are going to continue to reproduce, you just said, no
Well-
matter what. And then you point to a political movement where they stop.
Okay, no, I'll give you that, I guess. But in that case, women are successfully exerting some kind of political pressure,
But
political
what
force
happens
against
if
men.
men in South Korea say,
F it.
no?
I mean, that would involve like forcible. That would involve. I mean,
Why would it involve?
how else could you force a woman to?
Well, they could do
be
it through incentivization. They could just say things like, you can't work, so you have to get married if you want to survive in this world. They could do things like that.
Yeah, and then you
where
know
it
what's
would be
crazy?
coercion.
And females are not going to do anything because Roe versus Wade was a good example of that. They just cried and did whatever, and men were not listening. Men were not listening. Roe versus Wade was overturned, and they were screaming and kicking, and men ignored it. And guess what happened? Guess what happened, guys? They had to eat it. At some point, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's gonna be a point like this. Like, you cannot have a job unless you're married and have your first 2 kids. Like, you can only have a job if you have 2 kids or 3 kids, unless there's an exception where you can have more kids or something happen, right? There has to be some exception, but you have to at least have 3 kids. This is where we're gonna head, guys. Like that, laws like that.
But it would not be that. We can't say that word, by the
Sorry,
way. But
sorry.
essay, it would not be essay. So what I'm saying is that there's all sort of incentives which can be put down. So you appeal to a woman's biology and the fact that she wants to have children, but you also dismiss indoctrination. And there's a huge indoctrination program that tells women to have a nest egg before they get married. And so their early years, in their 20s, they're not having kids. And they wait until they're in their 30s. The average marriage age now is 31, I believe, in the United States. It's over 30. That's not really very good for child rearing. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I don't. Why is that not good?
Because your most fertile years are behind you.
But if we're still having children at replacement rates,
We're not.
Oh, we're not.
We're
But
way under
do you think that's
replacement rates.
because women are waiting later to have
Man, it's just common sense, bro.
children?
Yeah. Well, it's because of material.
It's just common sense, of course. If you're having kids, your first kids at 31, do you have more years to give more kids? No, right? It's just common sense, guy. But they want to ignore common sense. But we're watching here. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you next.